Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. Taxpayers can protect themselves from scammers by knowing how the IRS communicates. So we need to know how the IRS communicates. I'm assuming that we need to know the more subtle communications from the IRS, possibly being able to predict and interpret their body language and their facial expressions. For example, when the IRS raises an eyebrow at you, it generally means, but not always, that the IRS knows you're hiding money from them, and they're going to find that money. They're going to be spending that money at some point in the future, one way or the other. Anyways, that's just my interpretation. Let's see what they have to say here. IRS Tax Tip 2021-124, August 24th, 2021. If the IRS does call a taxpayer, it should not be a surprise because the agency will generally send a notice or letter first, meaning the IRS will typically make their initial communication with the letters. So the letters are typically going to be out by mail. They are a bureaucratic process, so it's going to be a slow kind of process for them to be taking action. They typically will send a letter, for example, say that we're going to respond, or they would like a response in 30 to 60 days. And if no response happens, they send another letter, and so on and so forth. By the time they take some other action to communicate, for example, with a phone call, you are generally well aware of the issue that possibly could be phoned about. And at that point in time, even if you're not sure that you think it might be a scam that they're calling you, you could then possibly say, I'm going to contact you directly from the letters that you have been receiving, or go to your IRS website, to your account on the IRS website, and possibly verify from there so that you know that you're communicating with the actual IRS. Understanding how the IRS communicates can help taxpayers protect themselves from scammers who pretend to be from the IRS with a goal of stealing personal information. So clearly, the IRS is sending out more money these days with regards to the refunds are going up due to the fact that we have these refundable credits. We got these prepayments that are going out. They're in charge of these stimulus checks. So a lot of money going out from the IRS. That's going to increase the level of scammers that are going to try to be pulling scams. So that means one scam would be that they try to try to impersonate being the IRS, and you want to be aware of how the IRS communicates so that you know that you're actually talking with them and not to a scammer. So here are some facts about how the IRS communicates with taxpayers. The IRS doesn't normally initiate contact with taxpayers by mail or by email. In other words, one more time, the IRS doesn't normally initiate contact with taxpayers by email, because they typically do initiate by mail to start out. Do not reply to an email from someone who claims to be from the IRS, because the IRS email address could be spoofed or fake. So that's going to be one of the most common ways that people are going to try to get information, because obviously when we're checking our emails, we might be in a rush. We might be checking them on the phone or something like that. And then they take you to a false website, possibly go for phishing and get more information at that point. So you want to not reply in that way. And remember, take your time. And if you do think it's actually a legitimate email, which it's quite likely that it's not, given the fact that the IRS will usually communicate through mail, but if you think that it is, then you want to go typically to the IRS website itself, possibly file into your account, and hopefully they're getting better and better at putting the information in your account on irs.gov, and you might be able to verify if any communications have been going out on that end. So emails from the IRS employees will end in irs.gov. So anytime they're taking you to a website, if you do see a website that they're trying to spoof and go towards, the IRS website ends in this .gov. So any kind of government website will typically end in .gov as opposed to .com. So it's .gov, So anything that's anything other than that, .com or .org or .info or something like that, is not going to be a government website. It will not be the IRS website. The agency does not send text messages or contact people through social media. So they're not going to text you. So anybody that gives you a text message, that's not how the IRS will communicate. So you could basically discard that clearly, and they're not going to give you social media. It's not going to face message you or tweet you or call you out on Twitter. This person hasn't paid try to give you the social pressure and all that kind of stuff. No. They don't do that. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that at some point in the future, but now, no, they don't do that. So fraudsters will impersonate legitimate government agents and agencies on social media and try to initiate contact with taxpayers. So when the IRS needs to contact a taxpayer, the first contact is normally by letter delivered by the U.S. Postal Service. So they're still old bureaucratic type of agency, right? They're going to send it by snail mail, the Postal Service, give you 30 days to respond, and so on. Nice, slow, easy process with the IRS. So you should know very well, again, and then when they act, it's usually in a slow process. So you're usually really aware of the problem by the time they take action. So debt relief firms send unsolicited tax debt relief offers through the mail. Fraudsters will often claim they already notify the taxpayer by U.S. mail. Depending on the situation, IRS employees may first call or visit with a taxpayer. In some instances, the IRS sends a letter or written notice to a taxpayer in advance, but not always. Taxpayers can search IRS notices by visiting Understanding Your IRS Notice or Letter. There's a link to that here. However, not all IRS notices are searchable on that site, and just because someone references an IRS notice in email, phone call, text, or social media does not mean the request is legitimate. So in other words, if someone got a little bit more advanced on their scamming techniques, as we know, most scamming techniques on if they're text messaging you, it's usually not a very sophisticated technique of scamming. If they're just sending out emails and you know it's spam, it's pretty clearly spam, then that's not very sophisticated. If they took a step further, they can actually be quite, if they put a little time into it, then it can be a lot more difficult to pick out the scammers. So if they put a little time into it and actually look up a notice letter or something like that, and they have that as an in to be able to say, hey, look, I know you got this letter, and they know about it, so they can give level of assurance there. So just because someone references the fact that you got a letter, doesn't necessarily mean they're from the IRS. It does mean you're dealing with a scammer who's stepped up the game a level, and for some reason is focusing on you. You would think because normally that takes a little bit more time to do, but the same process would be there. You want to file. You want to go to the IRS website and go to there directly, and then as much as you can, and then you should be able to determine the communications from the source, from the IRS website, that you don't go to from the link in an email, but directly to irs.gov. IRS revenue agent or tax compliance officers may call a taxpayer or tax professional after mailing a notice to confirm an appointment or to discuss items for a scheduled audit. The IRS encourages taxpayers to review how to know it's really the IRS calling or knocking on your door collection. So there's a link to that here. Private debt collectors can call taxpayers for the collection of certain outstanding inactive tax liabilities, but only after the taxpayer and their representative have received written notices. So they might go to these debt collectors that the IRS is hiring, to get the debt and whatnot. But you should receive notice of that. Again, you're probably well aware of it by the time that's the case. So private debt collections should not be confused with debt relief firms who will send lien notices via U.S. mail or email taxpayers with debt relief offers. Taxpayers should contact the IRS regarding filing back taxes properly. So IRS revenue officers and agents routinely make unannounced visits to taxpayers' home or place of business to discuss taxes owed, delinquent tax returns, or a business falling behind on payroll tax deposit. IRS revenue officers will request payment of taxes owed by the taxpayer. However, taxpayers should remember that payment will never be requested to a source other than the U.S. Treasury. When visited by someone from the IRS, the taxpayer should always ask for credentials. IRS representatives can always provide two forms of official credentials: a pocket communication and a personal identification verification credential. So it's just like when the police knock on your door and you ask for the badge or something. Do you have your credentials with you, IRS agent? And then they give it to you and you're like, all right, fine, possibly. More information can be found at the links below. And so we have the IRS Taxpayer Bill of Rights, secure tax payment options, consumer alerts, report phishing and online scams, and phone scams. There's links to those items here, and there'll be a link to this in the description.